Hey everybody, welcome to Spotlight, a podcast where we shed some light on people in the baseball and softball community. This could be anyone from players, coaches, entrepreneurs, and anyone who has an interesting story we can learn from. Today's guest is someone I've wanted to chat with for years now. Started his company, which we'll get into a few years ago, and I've been very familiar with him. So I'm glad we finally have this conversation. He's the president and founder of Dugout Mugs, a company that makes incredible drinkware, mugs, wine glasses, a bunch of other cool stuff, and more from baseball bats. Randall Thompson, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So before we get into anything, I'd love if you could just give an explanation of Dugout Mugs as a company, because I gave like a really short overview, but it goes so much deeper. You guys have done so many things with Dugout Mugs that people probably don't know. So I'd love to hear just, Dugout Mugs from your point of view.
Yeah, we're rolling out a new mission statement, so I might stumble over this a little bit. It's not in my heart and soul yet, but what we're attempting to do is celebrate the heroes of the baseball community by creating by creating unique baseball gifts. Something like that. Don't quote me on it yet. We're still in the works on it, but yeah, what we ultimately do is we create really unique baseball gifts. We take the barrel of a baseball bat, convert it into a drinking mug, do the same thing with the knob of a baseball bat, and we turn it into a shot glass. Those two are unique to us. And then we take the handle and turn it into a bottle opener. That's been done for a while, but we just use our MLB license on it. And then we also created something called a wind up, which is a mini baseball bat wine glass.
Yeah, no, I saw those. I thought those were super cool. And I mean, just preparing for this interview, I went through your whole site, and you guys have some, not only cool products, but your story is really cool too. And it's just such like an organic beginning with like an aha moment. So could you just take us through like what's the beginning? I'm sure you've told the story a million times, but what was the inception of Dugout Mugs? How did it start?
And it was in a dugout that you played across from. It was at Florida Tech, and I signed with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2011 after I got done playing as a senior sign. I got released in 2012, so shortly after I got signed, they gave me the old boot, and I kind of bounced around a little bit, and I realized I wanted to go back to baseball in some capacity. So I went and started coaching at Florida Tech, and the hitting coach / recruiting coordinator, he was cutting wooden baseball bats in half in the dugout, creating his own sort of training tool, and a bunch of loose bat barrels were lying around in the dugout. And as I was sitting there, I kind of just examined one and looked it over, and I thought to myself, there's like that natural cupping to the bat. I said, I wonder if you keep going with that cupping and just turn it into kind of a cool drinking mug. And that's where the idea for the Dugout Mug was born. The actual product didn't show up until a little bit later, but that's where the idea was birthed.
Yeah. I mean, you guys laid this story out so nicely on the website and everything. So I feel like I already kind of know the answers, but like hearing it from you is still totally different. One of the things I really enjoyed on the About page was like that was the sketch, like the original sketch, which like, I'm so happy that you just kept that and just took a picture of it, because looking back, you must see your company now and you must look back at that picture and you'll be like, so much stuff has happened, but
there's so many things that I have. Why I decided to keep all sorts of like just what would be perceived as junk now. It's kind of in my nature. I kind of keep little piles of everything everywhere, but in general, I have Tupperwares of stuff, of drawings and thoughts and notebooks of thoughts. And I look back on that, and just the other day, I was looking at one of the first sketches of the logo. I wanted to call it the Club Mug, or the Club Mug Company or something like that. And I sketched that out, and I looked back on it, and I was like, yeah, I'm glad I went with Dugout Mugs. But yeah, I do. I have all sorts of stuff that I look back on every once in a while.
Yeah, man, it's so funny because we talked about it off the podcast. We do have very similar stories. I went to Rollins, you went to Florida Tech. and I pulled up, you pitched a complete game. Was it a shutout? I didn't even look. I was like, I want to see if I got a hit. I probably wouldn't if I didn't get a hit. I went 1 for 4, and to preface, it was an infield hit. It was like the epitome of my career. So I love that, like, on your about page, you talked about going full circle, coming back into baseball. And I think it's really funny that we're having this conversation years later. It's a similar story, and we had that history. But take us through the start of Dugout Mugs. Like, what, you have the pictures on your website. It looks like you had a circular saw and like a heat press next to you. Like, what was the first year of Dugout Mugs? Because obviously you were doing this yourself.
I can get into the real nitty gritty of it. I'll try to keep it at the condensed nitty gritty, but I moved over to St. Pete. I left coaching. I had this strong desire to be creative. And so I took this ad agency internship that was unpaid. And luckily for me, my sister lived about 10 minutes away from this ad agency. So I moved in with who's now my brother-in-law, and my sister for like 3 or 4 months while I tried to figure out my life on the ad agency side of things. I was pushing tacos at night, and then I was a waiter at a taco spot. And during the day, I was doing this ad agency thing. And to keep this condensed, both just kind of fell apart at the same time. And and then I moved into my sister's backyard, which she converted her garage into a studio apartment. And I was just kind of back there, just really just like looking at myself in the mirror saying, what the hell has your life become? And so I'm blessed that I constantly have ideas, and kind of just in this moment of, I'll call it desperation, because I wasn't in a great headspace. Didn't really know what I was going to do. I kind of go in my back pocket and I say, you know what, turning a bat barrel into a mug seems like the most simplistic idea that I have. And it seems the most realistic on something that I could actually do. And that was right around 2015. And I just started asking myself a whole bunch of questions. I ended up getting a job that I worked from about 6:30 to 2:30 every day. I was driving around a paint delivery van, and every stop I was Googling stuff, trying to figure stuff out. And from 2:30 until whatever time, just trying to learn Shopify, learn all sorts of different things. And that's kind of just how the foundation to Dugout Mugs, and how Dugout Mugs ultimately came to be, was just that 3 o'clock to question mark hustle after driving the paint delivery van all day.
Yeah, man. I mean, kind of the same thing. I was doing personal training, and I was pouring concrete and shoveling snow in the winters and doing all this stuff just so I could like carve out like 6 to 8 hours a day to just learn stuff, because I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea how to start a company. It seems like, the passion kind of shifted, because you were done with your baseball career at this point. Right. The passion kind of shifted from baseball, and you're taking, these years of playing baseball where you're lifting, you're going to the field, you're training, like your thought is like constantly on baseball, and you're just kind of shifting this. I mean, do you think you kind of took that? I mean, not just work ethic, but there's also a lot of creativity in baseball too. It's, especially as a pitcher, like you were a game of chess. Do you think that, your mindset for baseball kind of carried over the same way into Dugout Mugs in the beginning?
Yeah, I think so. That creativity it was kind of just poking at me. I think ultimately, so one of two things. Whenever there are like podcasts or certain types of interviews, I always say that I feel like entrepreneurs are born much like big leaguers are born. Mm. It takes a special type of person to play in the big leagues. And then it also takes a special type of person. I'm not saying special as in like patting each of us on the back, but it does take a special mindset to especially in the beginning, to stick with it and to continue to go. The resilience side of things, yeah, sure, that translates over from baseball. The long days translates over from baseball, as you can relate. From a college baseball season standpoint, 6 days out of the week, 14-hour days are pretty common. So we already know how to work long, which is a pretty big part of the equation. But just in general, I really do think um, I, I was born to be an entrepreneur, and I truly feel that at my core. I didn't know what that necessarily meant once I got out of baseball. I always knew I had an interest of being creative. I always knew I had an interest in business concepts and learning how different things work and critically thinking. But I didn't really think that, oh, that means that I should start a business, even though I wanted to. I just didn't know what that necessarily meant. So yeah, there are skills that translate over and certain things that translate over from baseball. They do cross, but I do think it is, even just because you have one skill set within baseball, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate over to the business world.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like the mindset too is like, there's just, when you start off as an entrepreneur, everyone must have looked at you and said, like, mugs, like, really?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, mugs, like, and it's, bet on me, not on the product kind of thing.
Sure.
I saw that right away too. People are like, Josh, really? Baseball subscription box? That's like, what are you doing? Like, go work in finance like everybody. But it's like having that giant ambitious goal, kind of like the big leagues. So like I was always dead set on like, I'm going to make it to the big leagues, even though I'm 5'8" and I can only get, I can only get infield hits during college. But it's like, the cost of not doing it is so much greater than the cost of doing it. You know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, cool. If I just absolutely tank, I'll just continue to personal train and do hitting lessons until I figure out what else I want to do. But, it seems like you were just against that corporate culture right away. Which
didn't resonate with me. It really didn't. And I know that's the popular thing now. But we're talking 10 years ago or 9 years ago when I'm trying to get my first real job. And I'm just like, I don't know, man, this doesn't feel right. And, but that's kind of the cool thing now. And that's it's a crime to yourself, really. Like you don't have to be an entrepreneur. It kind of sucks in some ways. Like, don't do it. There's some senses of security that come along with not doing this, that sometimes I daydream about. Like, oh, what if I, wasn't doing this? How much easier would my life be? But yeah, that's kind of it's the thing right now, is that people want to do this, and it's very rewarding. Don't get me wrong, but it's so much work, and mentally, mostly, it's never ending.
Oh yeah, there's some days I'm sure you're like, I'm born to do this. Entrepreneurship's amazing, but then, when everything hits the fan all at once, you're like, what? Like, it's just so much get off on the weekends, like my friends,
right,
and not think about it on the weekend, or think about it when I get up, or think about it before I go to sleep, or have like stress dreams. You know what I mean? Because something's going wrong. And yeah, I mean, it makes the lows a little bit lower and the highs a little bit higher, I guess. But
sure.
Kind of like leading into, this next question, I think, the starting story is something that you tell probably all the time. Like, I saw these Dugout Mugs, I saw an opportunity, I left corporate culture, I started this company. That's kind of like the 0 to 1, right? You started something from nothing. You go from a 0 to like $1 million e-commerce company. And that's where like all those new entrepreneurs that's like popularized today, they're like, how can I do like a 7-figure e-com business? But like, you guys are past that already. You went from 0 to 1 already. Now you're in the 1 to 2 stage where you're scaling this up, maybe even further. But take us through like the 1 to 2 stage. Like you're past $1 million. You're like, the idea has product market fit. People like this. You're like, now what do we do? Because, now I see you have licensed MLB stuff. You went into, you went to different verticals. You have like all these different components, wholesaling everything. But like, what does it look like to take a company from 1 to 2? If that question wasn't long enough already.
No, I understand what you're saying. That was plenty long. A great setup. I would say that one, it's you start with a decision, because. So when I think of like starting a business, running a business, owning a business, and what that brings back to me, the risk that's put into it, the time that's put into it, I'm not quite sure why anybody would ever do this other than to just become filthy rich. And maybe that people don't necessarily like talking about the money side of things, but I mean, why else be in business, and why else take the risk, and why else just break your back than the idea of receiving a lot of money? And when receiving a lot of money, you can then do a lot of good things with that money, of course. But for me, it all stems back to the profit side of things. So there could have been a decision made that at some point in the company that, well, we're good right here. There's a certain amount of income that's coming from it. We could stay with this licensing. Getting the MLB licensing, there was a lot of risk that was associated with it. There was certain minimum guarantees that were associated with it that we didn't necessarily have the cash flow to cover at the time. Mm-hmm. So we were betting on this license, paying for the license essentially. But with all that said, and kind of a long-winded answer, is that going from 1 to 2 is first and foremost just a decision, a shift in you have to make the decision that you want to take it from one level to another level. And when you make that decision, just understanding, and this is looking back now, this is retrospect. I didn't know this when I made that decision, or when me and my business partner made the decision. There's a ton of crap in between. There's a ton of crap, and it all comes down to really, if you're a good critical thinker, and sometimes not even crazy amounts of critical thinking, just thinking, and just even a good Googler. So sometimes just asking yourself the right questions in that, from that 1 to 2 phase, is just ultimately what gets you to the next level of things. You have to bring good people in. But those 3 things, I would say: make a decision that you want to go to that next level. Number 2, accept the fact that there's going to be a lot of crap in between, but there's always answers to that crap. And number 3, just having the right people surrounded around you, are the 3 key parts of taking it from a 1 to a 2.
Man, well said. No, very well said. It seems like you've built just a really incredible team around you guys. I mean, it's the concept and the product is the kind of the easy part. It's like everyone has ideas. Everybody has ideas. And then to execute on the idea and go from 0 to 1 is really difficult. And then 1 to 2 is way more difficult. How did you pick the people around you? What do you look for in building a team?
So in probably our second employee was somebody by the name of Luke Laura. And he's not with us anymore, but in the beginning years of things, he was somebody that I coached in college ball. He was a freshman when I was there. And then years later, we kept in contact, but then years later, when he got out of college, he's like, "Hey, I have interest in this." And I'm like, "Well, you're great. So come on down." And he started at a really low level, started at a really low pay. And he was with the company for about 3 years. And he was just critical to the growth of things. Kind of the baseball mentality just kind of bled into the company of just, if it needs to get done, I'm going to get it done. If it needs to get done with excellence, it's going to get done with excellence. And even more so, Chris and I, who's my business partner, we've busted our ass to make this happen. And that ultimately kind of shakes down to everybody else that you bring in. And if they don't wear that same hat that you are, they kind of weed themselves out with time anyways. So I think that it ultimately, like all things, start at the top, and the top kind of sets the tone for everybody else. Like an Indian run sets the tone. And if you can't keep up, you just drop out of the run. And I think it's also a testament to Chris and I. Again, I guess I'm patting myself on the back, but Chris and I have really, we've hustled to make this happen. And people either sink or swim, and the ones that swim, they stick around and they end up helping us out a whole bunch.
Yeah. And I mean, you deserve every pat on the back, number one, because we're all these podcasts, we talk about how'd you get from A to B. Tell us about your success. Tell us about the money. Tell us about all this. But, you know, you deserve the pat on the back because you've gone through a lot of failures as well. And I think the failures are always, probably always more important to highlight than the successes, because those are your biggest learning, events. So, take us through some of your big failures, or maybe a failure that was the biggest, or the failure that was, eye-opening, or a failure that you learned from the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite expressions, and it's an oversimplification to that, is that shit is the best fertilizer. So it's just a simple way of saying that, like, hard times or crappy times help you grow. And it's, that's the mantra for baseball. So, like, the further we get into this, the more parallels there are with business and baseball as they kind of just continue to show themselves. But yeah, tough times are always tough time, but tough is so, I tell my wife this all the time. Is it really tough? Like, I can think of many other things that are actually tough. And I have a really hard time looking at certain scenarios and seeing them as problems. I always try, at least, to focus on the solution of things. So when I'm thinking back on big problems, I'm just like, drawing a blank. Trust me, there's a lot. But they almost enter into my mind, and I, like, filter out all the negative, and then I just bring out, try to think of all the positive side of things. You have to almost trick your mind to think, like, hey man, you're good. Like, don't worry about it. I brainwashed myself. Tough times. Oh man. Well, anytime that you're growing, like, year over year, we're just growing by a ton. You run into staffing issues. You run into inventory issues. You run into all sorts of issues, and I guess the important thing is just to focus on the solution, and then just move on from it. I'm trying to think of some specific idea or specific moments, but I'm really drawing a blank.
No, that's probably a really good thing. I mean, for us, there's been tons of times I was like, there might not be a plate crate next year. And then you kind of wiggle yourself out, and you grow and you learn from it. And now I just, like, I feel like, stuff like you said, like, it's tough to recall some big events, because the reality is it just happens all the time. Like, we have probably 3 fires to put out today. Like, we had 3 yesterday, and kind of, I just always look at it and I'm like, what's the best course of action right now to fix the problem? And then, how did it happen? So we can make sure it doesn't happen again. But right. I mean, it never stops. It just, like, it never stops, because as you grow, you have completely new problems. And, that's how I've learned the most. Do you think, failure is obviously, like, it's not a new concept that failure is essential for success, but is there anything in particular you'd like to add on to that? Because you and Chris have been in the weeds for, like, a long time. And I think just talking to you guys briefly already, like, you guys have this this headspace where you're like, we're still in the weeds. We're not even close to our value or our potential yet.
Not even close.
So, what do you have anything to add to just, your failures in business, and, how that's kind of added to your success, I guess?
Yeah. I'll break it into baseball and then business side of things. In baseball, I felt like I had a much more laissez-faire attitude to things. Like, when I was pitching, I didn't really think overly, I didn't overthink the result. So, like, if a catcher shows fastball away, I'm just going to try to throw a fastball away, and then however the batter reacts to it, I've actually found that in business, my ears burn a little bit more than they ever did in baseball. And I can never say that it's because I care more, because I really cared about my baseball career. But there's something about business that I've had to learn. I personally have had to learn how to shed some of the uncertainty of things. I find myself more worried about. I'm more anxious about the future, and that kind of affects what goes on in the present. And being raised by who I was raised by, I constantly analyze things and kind of look at things like how they could go wrong, and that slows us down. It also keeps us safe, but it also slows us down. So it's especially over the past year, I've personally, not speaking from like a business standpoint, I've had to allow myself to zoom out and get out of the weeds and kind of look to see where things are actually going, and realizing that like X amount of dollar decision or this decision or doing things this way might not necessarily yield this huge like collapse of Dugout Mugs. And so I think the more that it's grip strength, really. It's, you squeeze that bad boy and you choke it, then, well, you're in trouble. But if you let go too much and it just flutters away, then you're in trouble. Over the past couple years with business, my strength has been too tight, and I'm starting to realize that. And I would say that's a failure, that maybe we haven't grown as quickly as we could possibly have grown because of my grip strength. So, so learning what that should be is probably a failure of mine, but also just a hell of a learning experience so far.
Awesome. So in that awesome penny hoarder video on the site, I watched it a bunch of times. I thought it was just fun to watch. It was fun to see what you guys have built and hear it in your own words. But you said in the video how this whole thing started was by creating my own big leagues. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Like you alluded to, it was like big leagues or bust for me. And from a very, very young age, I always envisioned myself being a big league baseball player. I had visions of being in Fenway Park. I had all sorts of visions. My parents being in the stands, and like what my walkout song would be, and just like all sorts of things. When that didn't work out, I had to pour my passion and my purpose and my energy into something, and that's kind of taken the shape. The Dugout Mugs has certainly taken the shape of that, and to me, Dugout Mugs is 100% my opportunity to create a brand new big leagues for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And same thing. I had this like dogmatic view of the world where I was like, I'm going to be a big leaguer no matter what. It did not happen. It's like a really, really, really incredibly tough breakup when that happens too. And you're like, all right, I got to hang him up. Like you're kind of in panic mode. And you have a lot of friends that have, played professional sports. It doesn't matter whether it's like hockey, football, baseball, anything. You have this like super identity tied to your sport because you're like the baseball guy growing up, and like you're like, I'm gonna be in the big leagues, and you're so confident you tell people, and then after like years and years and years, people kind of forget that, and they're like, oh, Randall's like still playing baseball. That's kind of cool, but whatever. And you're just kind of like tied to it from an identity standpoint, and
100%.
I think a lot of people have a hard time going to that corporate culture, like we were talking about. But yeah, to see you kind of sink your teeth into Dugout Mugs and creating your own big leagues, I think anyone, could inspire or aspire to do that.
Yeah. I wish people that get out of baseball, I know it's incredibly tough. No matter how it ends, whether it's on your terms or on somebody else's terms, I know it's incredibly tough. And for that reason, your identity is all tied up in it. And I wish there more people would take that little shift of perspective that you can create your own big leagues in some capacity or another. It doesn't have to be your own business, but how you look at that, how you look at certain things that you're pursuing. That is, big leagues ain't coming. So like that's your new big leagues. And I think that people would be much happier if they took that approach.
Awesome. You also said in this video that when you were in Little League, you used to stand behind the mound and you said, anything is possible. Anything is possible.
Yep.
Anything is possible. For
sure.
So I have like two questions to that is like, where did that come from? Because clearly like that came from somewhere. Like a 11 or 12-year-old doesn't just have that mentality right away. So where did it come from? And it seems like that carried you through your whole baseball career and into Dugout Mugs. So could you just talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know because like I was saying earlier, my dad's super realistic, but it's like his realistic is pessimistic. It's like, and so it might be an overcorrection of that. Is what I think. But ultimately, I think I was just born a dreamer. I kind of like when I envision my life being really great and having lots of nice things and being really happy and like the way that I think life should be, not so limited. I really years and years and years ago when I got released, I started looking up the odds of us even being born, and the odds are incredibly unlikely. And so to me, like, I don't think life is like a coincidence or an accident. I think we all have a purpose. And that purpose shouldn't be small, at least in my, like, what I hate is I don't want to push this onto anybody that doesn't feel this, but I feel it. So like, if I feel it, then I should pursue it. Yeah, anything is possible. I don't know. I really don't know. I've just always been a dreamer, and it might be an overcorrection to my realistic dad. That I feel like he told me that life is a certain way, and maybe I'm overcorrecting and saying, no, I don't think it is. I don't know. I really don't know.
Man, I feel like
who I am.
Yeah, I feel like we just had very, very similar stories because I've had, my dad's been obviously extremely supportive of Play Crate, but like when we first started, it's like very practical. Is it like that generation was just very practical because there was no internet, there was no Shopify, there was no Google where it's like, hey, I want to learn everything about being an e-com entrepreneur. Like there just wasn't that mindset. You're like doctor, lawyer, like whatever. There was just such like a limited viewpoint of the world. And like the American dream has definitely changed from white picket fence and, a 3-bedroom house to something totally different.
No doubt.
You talk about, being a dreamer and creativity just being such a huge part of your life. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, what does being creative mean to you? And then also, how do you build creativity into your life?
Creativity to me, creativity comes in all sorts of shapes and forms. One that I wish I had that I don't have is musical creativity. Something that really appeals to me about the music industry and just musicians in general. I think to myself, if I wasn't a big leaguer, I'd love to be like Eddie Vedder, just rocking out in front of like 40,000 people. But creativity just comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and it lives within you. And really, it's so subjective. Like look what's going on with NFTs right now, to where people are selling things that are digital artworks that I'm just looking at and I'm just like, why is somebody paying that much money for that?
The $65 million one. Unbelievable. And like the NBA top shots, like that is wild to think that exists.
It's just so subjective. And it's just like the market kind of just, I don't know what happens with the market. I don't get it, but yeah, creativity is pretty much whatever you want it to be. And ultimately, I mean, I hate to say it, but ultimately the market determines the goodness or the badness of your creativity. And it's not it's not by pure definition of things. It's just like, the pet rock. I mean, it's creative in some capacities. And for some reason, the market said that, hey, this is creative. We want it. But that's different from if it makes you feel fulfilled that you're just drawing in your studio and you hang up your photos of your drawings on your walls and that makes you feel good. If that makes you feel full, then you should do that. But if you're looking at creativity from trying to monetize it, I wouldn't think about it too much. If you have an idea, just take the idea and just figure out how to put it in front of people, and they'll quickly tell you whether it's a creative concept that people want or not. And then I don't remember part two of the question.
How do you build creativity into your daily life?
I don't know. Have you ever played with guys that you that are like just raking, and you're like, hey, how do you swing? And they're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just whole career. I was like, how do you hit the ball better? Like it has every guy that. You're in flow. You're in this flow where you're just like, your confidence and your mechanics and like everything just slows down for you. And there's no, like, you're not working within like time constraints. Everything just feels like the way that it's supposed to be. You're like, the best way I can describe it is just like flow. Like you're a half hour into a book and you're like, I don't know whether I'm 2 hours in or 20 minutes now. You just kind of like lose that sense of time.
Well, so that's the thing, is that like that's what one person will tell you, and then the next person will say, well, I eat a bowl of spaghetti every day before I hit, and that helps me hit. Creativity is one of the things that I was just blessed with the ability to be creative. I just see things and then it just pops in my head. The best way I've ever heard it explained, I didn't take very much away from college, but I did take this away that I think it makes a whole lot of sense to me. If you're trying to be creative, is listen to yourself think. So I don't remember what professor said that, but at one point the professor said, if you ever want to create products and get rich, listen to yourself think. And I kind of agree with that. Like as you're kind of going about your daily life and you're doing certain things, if you tap into your internal dialogue and you kind of just listen to yourself, a lot of interesting stuff goes on in that internal dialogue that you might not realize. And then you'll ask yourself a lot of questions, and those questions will ultimately, if you allow yourself, they'll lead to answers. And those answers could potentially be something creative that people might want.
Cool. Yeah, I've never heard it from that viewpoint before. So I'm glad I asked that question, because that could be a new tool in the toolkit.
Yeah.
I got one more question for you, and then I have some rapid fire questions, and then we can wrap up. Okay. But we talked a lot about, just like a pretty big gamut of things. But what's next? What's next for Dugout Mugs? What do you see on the horizon?
We have a product coming out it's going to be either right before Father's Day or right after Father's Day. I'm not quite sure. If I had to bet on it, it'd probably be after Father's Day. But I think this product is by far the best product that we've ever come out with, and I think it's going to change a whole lot for the company in a great way. I'll leave a little cliffhanger there, but just keep your eyes out for it, because I really think it's just gonna. And I'll put this out into existence. I'm a dreamer, but I think in perpetuity, I think for the light, like a Dugout mug. Yeah, I live till I'm 100 years old, but I think that as long as baseball's around, a Dugout mug has the potential, or anybody that's making something that looks like a Dugout mug has the potential to live as long as baseball's around. This product that we're going to release right around Father's Day, me being the dreamer, I think in perpetuity it has a chance of being $1 billion product. So I'll put that out in the existence and in the universe. I haven't told anybody that other than my wife. So here we are.
I am on the edge of my seat right now. I'm like, I really want to know. So I'll just, once we turn record off, I'll just harp on you for it.
Yeah. Twist my arm. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear about it and see what happens with it. So I don't know. I'm going to preface that with, I know nothing about what you're talking about. It sounds like it's such a great idea. And you listen to some of those thoughts that were coming up into your head. But yeah, so let's go into some rapid fire. I always say with rapid fire, take your time. You don't have to answer quickly. It might lead us in a different direction. But the first one is, if you can give your 16-year-old self advice, what would it be?
It's not that big of a deal. All things aren't that big of a deal. And your path, as long as you have faith in what's going on in the current moment, is ultimately setting you up for better and bigger things in the future. Just keep the faith of things is what I would tell my 16-year-old self.
Man, yeah. Couldn't have been said better. What's something you've changed your mind on in the past year?
Oh, shoot. Something I've changed my mind on in the past year. I'm pretty hard-headed. As of recently, I've realized that craft beer might not be best for my stomach. So I used to drink nothing but Miller Lite, and then I moved to St. Pete. You went to Rollins. I don't know if you ever went over to St. Pete, where Eckerd was. And they got, and I lived there for however many years, and there was 5 or 6 years, and there was just breweries everywhere, and it's just like impossible for me not to fall in love with craft beer. Mm-hmm. And then I crossed the 30 mark, and it just feels like every time I drink craft beer now, it's just not sitting well in my stomach. So I would say the thing that I changed my mind on in the past year is craft beer is probably not a good choice.
Which is probably a tough call, owning a mug company.
I know it.
That is you are at events. I'm sure you guys have awesome office parties. Owning a mug company, because you get to put stuff in the mugs, but that must be a tough call. Maybe run some extra miles or something.
Well, not only the shape of the belly, but just also the internal. Your stomach is your second mind. And when I start drinking these craft beers, it just gets me churning. It just gets me feeling strange, but probably too much information for rapid fire here. But yeah, craft beer is maybe not the best choice.
No, we dig deep on this podcast. We get no one else gets. We want to know what everyone's microbiome looks like. What's the best advice anyone's ever given you?
My dad. Like as much as my dad's a realistic dude, and his shortcomings. I love the I don't know what you would call this, parable. I don't know, but it's just I love the idea of two guys grow up with an alcoholic dad. One guy ends up being an alcoholic, the other ends up being a pastor. And when you ask both of those guys why they are the way that they are, they both have the same answer of saying, "Are you kidding me? Look at my dad." I love that. And what I love about my dad is his outlook on certain things has caused me to look at things in a certain way, for the good and the bad. He's taught me lessons through what I believe to be the wrong way of doing things versus the right way of doing things as well. But the best advice that he's ever given me, raising me, is to never quit. And it's a really simple. It's about as simple as it gets. But he would never let me just, if I had a season that I didn't like the coach or whatever the scenario was, he would make sure that I saw something through before I decided that it wasn't for me anymore. So best advice I've ever gotten in my life is just the persistence of my dad saying, no, you're not going to quit. Don't quit. You don't quit.
Wow. Last question. If you had a billboard potentially reach billions of people, tons of people, you probably heard this question before.
I haven't.
But I always love the answers that I get. Can't have anything to do with Dugout Mugs or anything commercial. What would your billboard say?
Keep the faith. It's my life's motto. That I would say keep the faith. I think people need that. I think that I really do think whenever you harness in and realize that all the things that are going on in your life right now are ultimately just setting you up for really great things in the future. I 100% believe that in my heart. And I think that if people 100% bought into that, it would change their whole entire perspective on life. So keep the faith is what my billboard would say.
Amazing. Randall Thompson, thank you so much for being on, taking the time. Like the podcast is fun, but just getting to know you a little bit better has just been really great. I'm glad we got to connect finally. I feel like we've come full circle from Rollins and Florida Tech. Where can people learn more about you and about Dugout Mugs? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, the best place to check out Dugout Mugs is Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's all at Dugout Mugs. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Randall Thompson personally. We're on LinkedIn as well, and Dugout Mugs as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Keep the faith. Appreciate it, man.